All right, welcome to the Latest.com show. I'm Igor Daras. Joining us from Canada, he's a staff writer at Latest.com and a contributor to She-Hawk from the socialist utopia of Toronto, Eric Carrier. And he's a 24-year veteran of the U.S. State Department and the author of We Meant Well. He's the guy that Ted Cruz talks about when he talks New York values, Peter Van Buren. Well, last we left you, there were 9 members of the Supreme Court, and the big story was Hillary and Bernie, and what a difference a 3-day weekend makes. So first, let's talk about that South Carolina debate, because holy crap, that devolved quickly. 6-way shouting match. Things were said, they can't be taken back, some in Spanish. Maybe the biggest story, though, coming out of the debate was Trump slamming George Bush for the 9/11 attacks, and then Jeb saying, no, my brother kept us safe. Now, Peter, it's kind of silly when Jeb says his brother kept us safe when the biggest terrorist attack in history happened on his watch, but how much culpability does the Bush administration really have for the 9/11 attacks there?
Well, the thing that's actually terrifying is that for a brief moment in that debate, Trump was the only one up there making sense.
Yep.
You know, I mean, culpability, I mean, that's an interesting word. I mean, first of all, Bush was president of the United States for 9 months before 9/11 took place. And he had famously ignored the warnings from the intelligence services that bin Laden was planning to strike in the United States. His intelligence services, particularly the NSA, the CIA, and the FBI, were not sharing information that might have led to uncovering the plot.
Well, Peter,
and
his
Bush had his head up the Saudis' ass. Yeah, sorry?
His chief of staff this week defended that by saying that previous administrations, namely Bill Clinton, had created these bumps and that prevented the CIA and intelligence agencies and the FBI from cooperating and even connecting the dots.
Well, obviously, there had been over 200 years of presidency prior to George Bush stealing the election in 2000 and assuming the mantle. And absolutely, his predecessor, Bill Clinton, I'm sure had done things wrong. But that's pretty disingenuous to sort of blame a major screw up on, the guy who came before you, particularly when you had 9 months to work on it, and particularly when your intelligence services were specifically warning you that something was going to happen. There was no doubt that the United States had a sense of something was going to go completely wrong. I know that, for example, I was at the U.S. Embassy in Tokyo, and the day before 9/11, we issued a citizen's warning that said there was likely to be some type of terror act committed against American interests overseas. And that was based on information that came from intelligence services. It was publicly announced by us. There was stuff in the pipeline, and it was ignored by Bush, and it was on his watch. End of story. If Obama's going to claim credit for killing bin Laden, or God help us, fucking Hillary, you can't pick and choose how these things work. You're either the guy who was there when it happened, or you're not.
Yeah, well, interestingly, the polls in South Carolina since that debate, where George Bush is apparently popular, have not shown any kind of slide or any kind of hurt in the Donald Trump's poll numbers for saying that. And you mentioned, interestingly, he actually sounded like one of the more reasonable candidates on that. In that mess of a stage, he was the one defending Planned Parenthood. He was calling the Iraq War a huge mistake. He, like Bernie, is the one that's actually pushing this stuff against politicians, lobbyists, special interests. Come general election, aren't we kind of underestimating this guy yet again and his appeal? Because, Eric, isn't the anti-establishment fervor that we're seeing going to carry over into the... What is going on in your house? You're under attack.
Are you washing the dishes, Eric?
No, my wife just came in with the laundry and the baby and the basket fell. Sorry.
You're
Can you
under
repeat the
attack.
question to get back on track?
You need President Trump to protect you. But, Eric, isn't the anti-establishment fervor we're seeing now on both sides, but whether it's on the Republican side with Trump, Democratic side with Bernie, isn't that going to carry over? And then Trump can win over some of these Bernie voters that will be, disenfranchised when Hillary Clinton wins.
I think the anti-establishment movement is going to be the major focal point of this election because people, for the most part, are tired of generic candidates that make all these promises and do nothing because they're too centrist. I think people are interested in a candidate that's really far to the right or to the left because they see that maybe they can facilitate a meaningful change, which is something we haven't seen in the political system in a long time. we thought we were going to get that with Obama, but it just didn't happen. And so I think people see Sanders and Trump as the opportunity for that.
I think the way to really drive home a point is to have a child's toy playing music in the background. Peter, there's a lot of voters out there, especially on the independent side, and I think half of the voters in the general election will be independent voters. They're not married to the Democratic Party. Some of them like what Bernie has to say, but if it's Hillary, Trump, how many of them are we going to see jump ship and support the anti-establishment guy?
That's a heck of a question, and I'm sure it's something that the Trump people, and perhaps even the Bernie Sanders people, certainly the Clinton people, are asking themselves right now. The Clinton people are definitely probing the depth of how upset Democratic voters are with the status quo. She has obviously started to, as she's gotten herself kicked in the butt by Bernie Sanders, and we're looking at it right now, a tie in upcoming primary in Nevada. She has definitely started mouthing some of the same things that he's been saying, and she's definitely trying to pull herself back a little bit from being the establishment candidate. The danger is always mostly your supporters, your weak supporters, just staying home and saying, I'm not going to vote at all. And Trump is polarizing enough that he may scare off some independent centrists or even weak Democratic supporters. At the same time, if it's true that people are as pissed as they seem to be in this primary season, it's a real danger that Trump will pull more centrist votes than anyone would ever have imagined.
I mean, supposedly they're tied in the Nevada caucus, although they don't really poll that heavily because even pollsters admit that they have no idea of knowing how people are going to vote. In South Carolina, even with the new revised polls, Hillary is leading him by more than 20 points. I don't think it's fair to say that it's that tied up going forward. So I think there is a realistic possibility that you're going to see a Donald Trump-Hillary race, and in that case, I don't know, you're going to have a lot of independent voters that they're not going to vote for Hillary. Hillary doesn't appeal to independent voters. We're seeing that by how much Bernie Sanders is crushing her by in the margins among independent voters. It will be interesting because South Carolina is an open primary. So like New Hampshire, we might see a lot of independent voters come out and sway the vote. So we'll see. But as far as, do you want to say something, Peter?
Yeah, I just want to lay down a marker on South Carolina. I'm aware of how far ahead the polls are showing her. But keep in mind that her support has proven to be very volatile, particularly as you inch up toward these voting days. And in Nevada, I mean, as recently as December, I think she was ahead by 20 or 30 points over Bernie Sanders. Now, obviously, he doesn't have that much time going into South Carolina, but she is not on an uptrend at all. Nevada also has a fair number of Hispanic and African-American voters, and if Bernie is able to pull some of those in, that may also shift things in South Carolina. Look, if she goes into South Carolina with one loss and two ties, that is not the tsunami of support that she expected to go forward on.
Fair enough. But Eric, we know South Carolina politics get ugly. It got ugly at that debate. Do you think anyone came out of that debate looking like a winner, or did everyone kind of lose?
It's a tough one. I think Donald Trump came out well because he performed as he needed to. I also loved his comment about Marco Rubio sweating like he came out of a swimming pool. I had to report on that today, and it's been cracking me up every time I think about it. Yeah, I think Trump came out on top because he's still doing well in South Carolina. And as long as he can build up awareness through the other states that are coming up, especially going into Super Tuesday, with the momentum he will get if he wins South Carolina, I think he's poised to do pretty well.
Well, Peter, it's only the third state to vote, and the claws are already out. The candidates are constantly attacking each other. Trump is again threatening to sue Ted Cruz.
Sue everybody.
Sue everybody. Which, by the way, I don't know if you got to it, Eric, but there's 169 federal lawsuits that Donald Trump is named in at the moment. I just threw my own self off. But aside from
how many
debate,
of those are sexual assaults, I wonder?
Aside from the debates, which are really ugly, the politics are getting ugly. Is anyone going to come out of South Carolina, Peter, not completely damaged by this race, or even the whole primary season?
Yeah, I think the person who wants to really badly claim that would be Jeb Bush. He wants to walk out of it he tried very hard in the debate to sort of play the victim. You can say what you want about me, Donald Trump, but you don't make fun of my family. And if he comes out with something other than another blithering defeat in South Carolina, I suspect it'll be as close to what you're suggesting as possible. Keep in mind Kasich, who just sits there. I mean, his whole thrust in that debate was, I am the most normal of all these people up here. Just reminding you all of that.
His pitch was, gee whiz.
Yeah, I mean, he got a little too into that, Ohio, Pennsylvania, folksy thing. But we haven't heard Hillary uncork her Southern accent for South Carolina yet. So stay tuned for more.
Yeah, we've been looking forward to it for weeks now. So we're on edge. By the way, the George Bush thing, I mentioned earlier that George Bush is popular in South Carolina. He won with about 50% of the vote against John McCain in that very dirty primary. His dad won with about 50% of the vote in his primary in 1988. And now Jeb Bush is polling at a whopping 10%. So just a small 40-point difference there between big brother and little brother.
Just numbers.
Trump was booed at the debate again, and he's saying they're stacking the deck on him. And now he's threatening to run as a third party again, which he pledged not to. He's saying they're breaking the pledge, so I'm not beholden to this pledge. Obviously, whatever, you can't trust him on any of these agreements. If something drastic happens where Donald Trump isn't the nominee, Peter, do you think there's a legitimate chance that he might run as a third party?
Every single prediction, I think, we have made collectively, and certainly me, on Donald Trump has turned out to be wrong. So, I don't know if you all remember, there was a Seinfeld episode where George realized that he constantly made wrong decisions, and so he decided for a week, whatever he thought he should do, he would do the exact opposite. I'm going that way now on Trump. So while no rational person would imagine running as an independent in our current political system, Trump just does Trump. And it's entirely possible that he'll go in there and try to play the spoiler, perhaps in the back room in return for something from either party at this point in time. I don't know that anybody could predict what effect he would have if it was a Democrat, a Republican, and Trump in the middle screaming at, calling them both idiots and liars and things like that. The point of Trump is to continue to be Trump. He has discovered that it doesn't really matter what he says. And in fact, the more over the top he gets, it either pushes him further ahead or he at least stays even. So I can't begin to predict what's going to happen.
Eric?
I don't think he'd run as an independent. It would be such a colossal waste. I know, we make these predictions and Trump always seems to surprise us, but I just can't see that he would do it. Well, I think he'll talk the game, and they'll keep him as a candidate in the Republicans. So unless he gets pushed out in some form, I don't see him running independent.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, it's getting hard not to see him running as the Republican nominee. Well, before we get to Scalia, Peter, you mentioned South Carolina, the Democrats. There's a new poll out in South Carolina that shows that Bernie has closed the gap in the black vote between him and Hillary. It's now 63-23. In November, it was 86-11. And, I mean, there's a few more undecideds this time around. That's really not cutting into it.
He's working hard, though.
He's working hard, but,
trying hard, yeah.
He's doing a little better after all that. But Hillary is doing everything right. She's pandering to all the right people. She's getting all the right meetings, all the right endorsements. And Bernie's just staying the course. We talked about it last week. There's more than 40% of the Democratic vote is non-white. Compared to New Hampshire and Iowa, where Bernie did really well, which is 95% white. Isn't this going to be Bernie's undoing, that he's not willing to pander to, win over the majority of key blocks in the Democratic Party that he's going to need to win this race?
It's going to be an interesting question of how this comes out. Keep in mind, if it's a rainy day, keep in mind if Hillary says something that isn't just right or something. I mean, you can easily chip away at her support. It can be that volatile in elections. The thing about Bernie and his non-white, non-support, I find a little bit hard to understand is that some of the messages that he's communicating, his core messages about raising the minimum wage, providing free or low-cost health care, providing free or low-cost college education should resonate across the board generally, and certainly with anyone in the Black or Hispanic voting bloc that's in the low-wage category. I don't know that he has to have a specific strategy for Blacks or Hispanics. I think his core message should resonate better. I'm not sure why that is. It may be a matter of money. It may be a matter of just sort of getting it out there, because as Eric pointed out, these gaps continue to close. I don't think he has enough time between now and South Carolina to really bring them that close together. Keep in mind that, there's two things going on. One is this contest for actual delegates. And Hillary, by her manipulation of superdelegates and probably a win in South Carolina, is going to be way ahead on that. But there's still a sort of PR battle going on, if you will, that will carry forward and maybe give Bernie enough time to win it. The idea would be that in this case, how little he loses in South Carolina is going to matter a lot.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting that you bring that up, because I think Bernie has that same mentality. Well, I don't have to make these Black issues or Hispanic issues. I'm just going to keep saying the things that I've been saying the whole time while Hillary is going. I mean, we talked about it last week at the Democratic debate when she was asked who her foreign policy heroes are. She went Nelson Mandela and Obama, when Sanders went with Churchill and FDR. So she's saying all of the – I mean, she's the panderer in chief. We all know this, but Eric – he's going to need to pander in order to win over some of these, majorities in these groups.
Yeah. Well, what I was going to say is something along the lines of how sad it's gotten, the entire concept of the African American vote, where they're willing to vote for candidates over and over, and in this case, Hillary Clinton, who have never done anything for them. I know in 2008 they voted for Obama.
I wouldn't say over and over. They did go towards Obama pretty heavily in 2008 when they matched up.
As I was going to add, the Obama vote, we have to question sometimes whether it was because he was the first African-American president or at the time.
I don't think you have to question it that much.
Of course, but, we in our modern politically correct society, I'm not no Donald Trump, so I can't just speak off the cuff. But what I'm trying to say is with Hillary Clinton, there is nothing that she is offering African-Americans, yet they flock to her like she is the next Black Jesus. And I can't for a second understand it, because here you have a candidate, like I've said before, who just reminds me of a Southern plantation owner, and they just love her. Blind devotion. There's no questioning why they shouldn't vote for her. No, it's just she's Hillary Clinton, therefore I should vote for her. Whereas when I look at Sanders, I see a candidate that has platforms that they could easily attach to, things about equaling the wage gap, which is a huge problem between those communities. Maybe reducing the reliance on food stamps by increasing wages. If I look even at earlier presidents, where she did nothing for Black people, of course they weren't voting for him. Bill Clinton, maybe you could argue, he was known as like the first African-American president, quote unquote.
Bill Clinton would argue that.
A little more. Yeah, Bill, especially recently, yes, right, he was playing that up. But that's also just to secure her some votes. But as I'm trying to say is I don't understand why they flock to Hillary Clinton. She does nothing for that community. And it's a sad representation of what they believe in if they're willing to vote for a candidate who hasn't even promised them a thing that she'll follow through on.
It is kind of ironic that this comes on the heels of a year of the Black Lives Matter movement really becoming a major thing and calling for massive change, a revolution, which is what Bernie's peddling. And yet there doesn't, maybe among the younger Black voters there are. But Peter, Bill Clinton on the campaign trail today likened what Bernie Sanders is doing with his supporters to like a Democratic version of the Tea Party. Do you think that's an accurate comparison?
No, I don't think it's even close. And, Bill Clinton should be embarrassed about some of the things he's been saying lately. Trump may or may not know better, but Clinton certainly does. The Tea Party is made up of people who aren't even quite sure what they're angry about. They want less government, except the parts of government that seem to do good things for them. They want the government to, to see parts of the Constitution stripped apart, but not their amendment. They're very much originalists with the Constitution, but hey, if the Republicans want to play parliamentary games to block a Supreme Court nomination, they're all over that. And they dress up in funny clothes. I'm sure 80% of them could not actually explain to you what the Boston Tea Party was about and who participated in it. But going back to Bernie Sanders, Bernie has come up and the word revolution gets used, and I'm not sure that's even the right word here, but he's basically saying, look, here are concrete proposals. You can disagree with my numbers if you want to, but I've got numbers that are hard that you can look at and disagree with. Here's what I'm planning to do. Here's what I think is wrong. Here's what I want to correct. It's not an ambiguous set of odd, crazy people shouting at each other. It's a single guy who's saying, if I'm elected president, here is what I plan to try to do. So Bill Clinton should really feel a little bit ashamed.
I was going to say, and most importantly, too, Bernie Sanders believes in government, whether it be big or small. He does believe in the system, whereas the Tea Party people just want freedoms on their terms, basically.
The other thing about Bill Clinton is we need to remember that he is the one who passed the Crime Act, I think it was 1994, and was strongly supported in that by Hillary. This is part of the legislation that created the 3 strikes you're out. Bill Clinton supported the war on drugs very strongly, which has adversely affected African Americans in large numbers. I'm not sure even what Bill did for African Americans to earn his self-proclaimed title as blacker than black guy.
It's really more about just reputation alone. I mean, that's what you were talking about earlier. There's no real reason for them to line up behind Hillary, and yet just that Clinton name carries a lot of weight, which is funny because a lot of the people that the Republicans thought would line up behind the Bush name have not. They refuse.
And if you think about it, the last thing the Democrats ever did for black people really was the civil rights movement for the 60s and then into the 70s. That's like the last thing that they've really ever done.
Obama has progressed a lot of not civil rights reforms, but a lot of criminal justice reforms. And the Senate has actually been willing to go along with him on it.
But even with Obama, sometimes I fear that he was too afraid to be seen as the brother or something. Like, that's why he didn't go too intense on it. No, but that's the truth.
I agree with you.
And historically, the Republican Party was actually the party of African Americans when dating back, the days of Lincoln freeing them.
Well,
so,
it's
funny. It was a great switch.
It
flipped. No, of course. I mean,
you're going back pretty far.
Yeah, I know we're talking like 200 years, but I'm saying it's just the idea that like you blindly support a party because of some very ancient historical thing. It needs to be more organic. We need to look at candidates and see them what their platforms are, not because they're blue or red. If Trump was, putting out good policies for African Americans, by all means, they should vote for him. They shouldn't look at it in colors, and that's a sad reflection, of the current political climate in the United States.
I mean, take a look at one of Bernie's proposals, which is to try to correct the insane prison system that we have in the United States, where we now have. Pardon me?
It's a lofty proposal, though. I mean, he wants to free a lot of people.
Well, of course, and we all understand that a lot of what gets said on the campaign trail is not going to happen. I mean, again, that's a very disingenuous point for Hillary Clinton to keep making, that, he won't be able to accomplish what he says. Well, very few presidents actually do. The point is to set a direction and see how far you can get. Bernie, though, is bringing up an issue that should be right in the heart of the African American community, and that is our ridiculous prison population in the United States, which adversely affects young black men well out of proportion to the number of young black men that are in our society. That should be something that is singing loudly in their communities. And again, I don't hear that resonating, and I truly don't know why.
By the way, another point to what Eric said about what Obama's done for black voters, his Justice Department has gone after police departments a lot more than we saw any previous Justice Department in reforming the Ferguson police, the Baltimore police, similar police forces. All right, let's talk about the big news from the weekend. It's going to be the big news for months, if not the next year. On Saturday, Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia passed away, and depending on who you listen to, he was either a 79-year-old man who died of natural causes, or if you listen to conservative radio, he was brutally murdered by Barack Obama, who suffocated him with a pillow. Okay.
There's also a theory for the Clintons being part of it.
Oh, yeah, you did that article on it. Let's hear some of your favorite Antonin Scalia conspiracy theories, Eric.
Okay, so the big ones, obviously Obama, orchestrated it. He's an assassin, sent in somebody to kill him so he could push his liberal agenda. That's the most plausible one, I would say.
That's the most plausible
I don't believe it, of course.
So Alex Jones brought this up yesterday, and he said that not only is it possible that Barack Obama had him killed, but Donald Trump is next, and Ron Paul. Like, Ron Paul, where did you pull that one out?
So the second one that is not plausible but exists is the heart attack gun. So allegedly they inject something, stops your heart basically. So that's another one. Then there was a weird theory about fucking Leonard Nimoy being alive with the Illuminati, orchestrating the death. That one was a little too far out there.
That one's not plausible. Like the Obama had him killed one.
No, not. Well, at least that one, it fits the narrative that the Republicans have been drumming on about for so many years. Whatever. The last one, which was odd too, was that the Clintons did that. Hillary Clinton had Scalia, however the hell you say it, killed so that she could distract. Because this theory thought that for whatever reason her email case would go to the Supreme Court, which is odd on its own. So the idea was that by getting him killed, that it would distract from her email scandal and she'd be able to kind of sneak by safely. So that one, not so plausible. That's a little strange because first off, her email will never go to the Supreme Court. It'll get settled at lower levels.
A lot of people don't remember Vince Foster when the Clintons were in power, but he was a former Clinton aide that committed suicide. That the Republicans said killed himself because he knew too much. No, the Republicans said they had him killed because he knew too much. Anyway, before Scalia's body was even cold, the Republican Party all came out about to block any nominee that Obama proposes, saying that the seat should remain open until the next president is sworn in almost a year from now. And, even that, should a new president nominate him a new justice, that would be its own months-long, drawn-out battle. So we're literally talking about more than a year of keeping a Supreme Court seat empty.
Isn't it disgusting?
That's two Supreme Court terms. There's the one right now and the one that would start next year. So that's two Supreme Court terms. And some candidates have brought up this Thurmond rule, which is this bullshit, thing that was in 1968, racist, bigamist Strom Thurmond came up with this thing that it's unseemly for a president to nominate a lifetime appointment.
And it's not a legal rule. It's not a rule of law.
It's not a legal rule. But even then, even if you listen, the rule is in the final 6 months. So it's completely not applicable here because it's still snowing outside. Yep. It's not the summer. So the Strom Thurmond rule is nonsense, and we should never mention Strom Thurmond ever again in any case.
And it reflects how pathetic our system is, too, that, we're trying to handcuff a president with still almost an entire year left. And, we're trying to not let him use his authority. Well, it's ridiculous.
You look at who's, you've got on the Republican slate, you've got Ted Cruz, who is a constitutional lawyer who clerked for the Supreme Court. Rubio's a senator and a lawyer. I'm not sure they may cover them all. But the point is that, the Republicans on their own just cooked up this meme over the weekend, which is now being embraced as yet another, muscle tussle between the parties. The media, instead of saying, excuse me, that's just completely made up weird shit. There's nothing this doesn't even make sense what you're saying. The media has picked it up like, constitutional crisis and all this other stuff like that. It just doesn't work that way. It shouldn't work that way. And ascribing any validity at all, to what the Republicans are saying they want to do, which is basically toss this nomination away for, at least a year. And that, of course, assumes there's going to be a Republican president, elected in November. It just really shows how far we've sunk in terms of any attempt at reasonable.
In my opinion, if a Supreme Court justice dies, you give it a week or two to cool off, and then you start to find a replacement. You don't leave the bench open for a year as the Republicans want. That's insanity. And we're talking about the Supreme Court, which is often seen as the main vehicle for change in this country. So we need that thing to be operating properly.
Yeah. It also is very rare. If I may be wrong, but I believe there's only been 3 justices that died on the bench before they retired. So this just doesn't happen. Ted Cruz keeps saying, there's 80 years of precedent of a president not nominating a Supreme Court justice in the final year. Just because it didn't happen doesn't make it precedent. It just never happened that way, timeline-wise. And
this is the kind
Ronald Reagan had one confirmed, but he had nominated him the year previous. What were you going to say?
This is the kind of collective ignorance that our modern politicians seem to carry with them, and it's just yeah, okay, so it never happened before, but that's just a freak accident. Now we have to roll with what's been dealt and try to solve it, not block the system up on some crappy law from 1968 that some racist senator, proposed.
Yeah, and just making up new rules kind of as they go along for their own partisan things. And again, this is just
I want to ask a question, Pete, and to you, Igor, as well. Sorry, not to cut you off. But do you think the Democrats would be doing the same thing if it was reversed?
Well, they did. They did that in the final year of George Bush's presidency, but it was with, federal judges, not Supreme Court justice.
Sure.
So, yes, absolutely.
I agree with you. Sorry, Peter, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I'm not sure, but I don't know that the Democrats would do that. They seem to be at least half a step behind the Republicans on craziness at this point. And that's not a whole lot to
partisan. But they're equally as partisan.
Equally as partisan. The Supreme Court is always supposed to be a little bit special. The Constitution gave them that role of sort of sitting above all this. And even when they want to make policy or rule on these things, the idea would be that they wait for these cases to rise to their level, and they're responsible for making an intelligent argument in terms of what they're actually ruling on. It's not supposed to be a place where you just shout each other down and call each other big fat liars and the other tactics which seem to be now part of the discourse. So, for the Republicans to pull this shit is just very, very sad to me.
Childish.
To be fair,
it's childish.
We have all these quotes of Mitch McConnell and these other Republicans slamming obstructionist Democrats in 2008 during that election because they weren't letting their nominees through. So we have all these Mitch McConnell basically slamming the very thing that he's doing now. But that also entails Chuck Schumer saying things like Mitch McConnell is saying now. We have quotes of this. It's only been 8 years. So to be fair, I think the Democrats, they're not any less dirty or any less obstructionist when it comes to, But
what I'd like to see.
Yeah. Go ahead.
What I'd like to see is some of the so-called adults of the Republican Party, guys like McCain, who have tried to set themselves a little bit apart from all the partisanship, at least a little bit. I'd like to see them really speak up and say, boys, let's deal with this rationally.
McCain has already been one of the guys that he came out and supported with the Republican Party in blocking the nomination. He said it shouldn't be done.
Really? I missed that. Well, now I'm even more depressed.
Well, they're playing a really dangerous game. I mean, there's major consequences. The Supreme Court is currently in session. This will probably go like this regardless because the confirmation fight would drag out. But we are going to see, in all likelihood, a lot of 4-4 ties with serious likelihood that we're not going to see another Supreme Court justice to begin the next Supreme Court term if they do succeed with this. Peter, can they get away with blocking him for a full year in the press? I mean, we're talking about it now. It's only been 4 days since Scalia passed away. Yep. Can this last for a year?
It's entirely possible. First, they can stomp on this in committee for a very long time all by itself before they even have to think about manipulating a vote or putting it up there. They can also, the closer they get to November, the stronger their position looks, and the stronger the polls, if the polls show the Republican candidate, the stronger their position looks. But I think that the issue of asking the media to sort of bring some measure of rationality to this is not going to happen. The media is just all over this story as a constitutional crisis or another Super Bowl, when the black team versus the white team, and we'll see who wins.
Hey, that's racist.
Okay, darker gray and lighter gray or whatever. The idea is that you would think every news station and every media place would have their constitutional lawyer on there saying, this is ridiculous. It's insane. It has nothing to do. There's no laws that say we can do this. It's the Senate has an obligation to advise and consent. The Senate, that's what the Constitution says. There's nothing in there that says the Senate should gum up the works when they don't like somebody. Or they're not even not liking someone. It's not like they're saying, well, we don't support, Loretta Lynch as the nominee for, they're just saying we won't support anyone.
And then what they're asking, they're asking to have the Supreme Court seat empty for, I mean, it's unprecedented. The only time it has been kept empty for a year was during the Civil War because of the Civil War. So if Ted Cruz wants to talk about precedent, that's about 200 years of, no, 150 years of precedent.
That if they leave the seat vacant, that sets a dangerous precedent for the future because that will become the norm.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to have lame duck presidents like 2 years into their final terms. It's pretty bad.
I mean, if that's going to happen, it's time to remove the term limit because at that point, you may as well not be the president anymore.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, you have the crazy situation. I mean, some of those folks, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, I mean, she's like 120 years old.
82.
What if you had a second vacancy? God forbid.
She might fall asleep.
A lot of the candidates right now, even in the ads, are saying how one of the biggest reasons you should come out and vote is because, with Scalia, if he lasts until the next year, the next president could realistically get 4 new Supreme Court justices on the Supreme Court and just completely change the face of it for a long time. So let's Obama is going to nominate someone regardless. And he has a very interesting choice to make because a lot of people say he might nominate someone like Peter said, Loretta Lynch, the Attorney General, who would be the first black woman ever nominated for the Supreme Court. And pundits say that might be a wise decision because, well, it would look bad if the Republicans are unfair to a black or female candidate. On the other hand, he could nominate someone like this guy everyone's been talking about, Sri Srinivasan. He's a member of the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals. He worked for both the Obama and Bush White House. He argued 25 cases in the Supreme Court. And most importantly, he was confirmed to his current job by a 97-0 vote. And it seems that the GOP would be less likely to block a candidate that every member of their own party, including Ted Cruz, including Mitch McConnell, voted to confirm. So, Peter, which way do you think Obama goes on this? Do you think he would go to the guy they can't say no to, or do you think that he goes to the person they probably will say no to and makes them look bad and hurts them in November?
Well, of course, they also approved Loretta Lynch. I don't think it was 97 to 0.
56 to 40 something. It wasn't even like.
Yeah, no, I understand.
You need 60 votes to get a Supreme Court justice.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Republicans have set themselves, have set the bar. They have said already they are not going to allow Obama to make an appointment to the Supreme Court. They haven't said we're going to take a very close look at his nominee or we're going to apply our own litmus test or anything like that. They said we're not going to allow Obama to make this appointment. And so whether he picks a candidate that is more centrist or whether he goes for, a transsexual Martian Syrian refugee, Black Lives Matter, Latest.com writer, the Republicans have basically said, no, we're not going to approve any of these people. We're going to block Obama from making an appointment. I think it'll be more challenging if they pick the guy whose name we can't pronounce because that will no doubt slow this process down as we kind of work through
and our
that alone. Yeah, and another podcast.
I may be getting it wrong.
But anyway, I don't think it matters who Obama appoints. I mean, he could appoint the corpse of Strom Thurmond, and the Republicans would still.
Because it's one thing for them to hammer a faceless, unnamed nominee, but if you put an actual person there who absolutely deserves the job, and the Republicans as a party are seen getting in the way over petty partisanship, that would hurt them going into November.
It could. Well, and it could light a fire under the ass of Democrats that are on the fence because then they see, oh, look at this, they're opposing the system, and they hate women. Oh, and they hate black people too. Okay, well, now we're definitely voting. It could be something that could be a little bit of fuel for the election.
But, I mean, spin it the other way. You're the Republicans, and you say, look, we got nothing against this person personally, but we're trying, we're working on a bigger plane here, a much more important point. Or they'll dig up something, if someone has argued 25 cases and been in the judiciary for all these years, somewhere along the way he's made an abortion ruling or a Second Amendment ruling or what have you that the Republicans will play up as if it was the only thing the guy's ever done.
Well, Srinivasan, he was with the Deputy Solicitor General. He argued 25 cases in front of the Supreme Court for the Obama White House. One of them was the challenge to the Defense of Marriage Act. And even after that, they did confirm him by a 97-0 vote. So it would be really difficult to go back on that when everybody in the Republican, I mean, that's a rarity because some of the other candidates, some of the lesser known candidates from various district courts around the country whose names have been thrown around, they didn't get a 97-0 confirmation vote. That's a rare thing.
Sure. I mean, but again, I mean, you get Ted Cruz out there saying, well, you know, we some of this information wasn't made available to us, blah, 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 blah. But ask another question. If you were out there as a potential nominee, would you really want to watch your entire life torn open for weeks, if not months, on the outside, on the chance?
A lot of these people have already gone through fierce confirmation battles, especially, you know, Loretta Lynch, whose nomination confirmation process lasted, I think, like 5 months. And these are all people that have gotten nominated to their current jobs fairly recently, so they have been vetted thoroughly.
No. It's the idea that none of this is going to be nice. Alec Jones and that, you know, the Republican hate machine will be cranked up. And whatever these people have done in their lives, or if not, they'll, you know, stuff that can be kind of exaggerated and made up. Most of these candidates are not people who have a high public profile. And their lives are going to be splattered everywhere. It's like becoming a celebrity. It's like winning an award or something. You go from someone no one's heard to where every detail of your life is played out in the media. Not everybody wants that.
In the media. Loretta Lynch.
Yeah, okay.
Though.
Right. I think we've already said that she would have a hard road no matter what. I'm talking about I think there's 3 or 4 candidates off the D.C. Court of Appeals whose names have been
I think it will
around.
be Lynch. I think she's the plausible one when you think about all.
Can you imagine how happy Loretta Lynch would be not to have to rule on the Hillary Clinton emails as Attorney General? I mean, as Attorney General, this would, you know, this case will eventually come to her. I have one more semi-funny but semi-serious thing, which would be to appoint Hillary Clinton, and you know, let her give her a gracious way to bow out of the race. Let the Republicans get in on the deal.
You guys are really getting ahead of yourself here. You guys are really thinking that she's not going to be the next president, and I'm not too sure to call it just yet.
I don't know. Just saying.
I agree with Peter. With Igor. Slip of the tongue there.
All right. Well, we'll see what happens with the Obama nominates. We're going to come back Friday and talk a little more about the preview of the South Carolina primary this Saturday. Thanks for tuning in. Keep reading Latest.com.